His Excellency, former British Ambassador Craig Murray, is a great friend of the show and a great friend of humanity. He scored a remarkable victory in the High Court in Edinburgh on the Palestine Action case just the other day, but he was unable to celebrate it in his usual style. In Rose Street in Edinburgh, he had to celebrate it with perhaps a rum and coke, who knows, in Caracas, Venezuela, for there he now is, ready to report for us on both of those subjects. Ambassador, Excellency, thank you for joining us. If you don't mind, I'd like to start on your historic victory in the Edinburgh High Court. Why don't you tell people what you have achieved? Because the mainstream media has been, rather sparse in their reference to it.
They most certainly have. Yes, we've now achieved a separate Scottish judicial review under Scots law of the prescription of Palestine Action, where the Scottish courts have accepted that there is a strong case, a case to be heard, that the prescription was illegal, was disproportionate, was contravenes human rights, both the Human Rights Act and the European Convention on Human Rights. And we're now going to have a judicial review in March, which is independent from a judicial review happening in England, because the High Court in England has no jurisdiction in Scotland. So Scotland will come to its own decision on whether or not the prescription of Palestine Action is legal. And this, of course, if it's found to be an illegal prescription, this will leave in prosecution scores and perhaps hundreds of people facing terrorist charges in Scotland merely for speaking their mind and saying that they oppose the genocide and support action against the Israeli weapons industry in the UK.
Yeah, terrorism charges for holding up a placard made of cardboard expressing their honestly held view. But why was it left to you to take this action? A man nowadays of, limited means. Why didn't the Scottish government take this action?
That's a very good question, and the Scottish government should be joining this action, because not only is it against an action against the terrible imposition on human rights and the ludicrous absurdity of calling Palestine Action a terrorist organisation, it's also asserting the independence of the Scottish courts against the English courts. So you would think the SNP government would be behind it. But sadly, the Scottish National Party, which used to have a good history of radicalism, nowadays is entirely pro-NATO and entirely neoliberal. And the Scottish National Party MPs, disgracefully, didn't vote against the prescription of Palestine Action in Westminster. So I'm not really expecting any succor from them. But part of the answer to the question as to why it falls to me is it always seems to.
Yes, indeed, so much falls to you, including where you are now. It looks very bright and sunny. You are seeking some clarity, as we all are, on what exactly is happening in Venezuela. What have you found so far?
I should say I've only been here 5 days, so there's still a lot of questions to be answered. But what I can say to you 100% for sure is that the picture of Caracas, the picture of Venezuela, painted systematically in the Western media, is a complete and utter lie. I've been here for 5 days. Within the city, I've probably travelled well over 100 miles now internally in the city, in the vehicle, going backwards and forwards to various places. And I've also walked for many miles in the city, in both wealthy areas and poor areas, and in both government supporting areas and opposition areas. I've seen a total of 4 guns in this city in 5 days. And there were 2 policemen outside the vice president's residence and 2 policemen outside the police headquarters, which you would find anywhere in the world. All the stories you hear of checkpoints and intrusion and armed gangs are simply untrue. It's simply a lie. Life here is extremely normal. There's no feeling of repression in this city whatsoever. There are opposition billboards around. And the other thing, which is a complete lie, is the shortage of goods and the shortage of food. All the shops, and I've been, again, in both the wealthy areas and in the working class districts, all the shops, no matter what they sell, are extremely well stocked. And there appears to be no shortage of anything that I can discern. So what I can say is that those things you can see immediately are completely different to the nonsense, the absolute nonsense with which we've been indoctrinated by the mainstream media.
Well, the fact that there are no guns might be because Trump has already won. That's at least what Trump says. What truth might there be in that, in your view, limited by 5 days' experience, of course?
And the Americans are claiming very much to be in control of the city and of directing policy. There's no sign of them on the ground. Apparently, the CIA director paid a brief liaison visit here a few days ago, but there's none of the active signs of American diplomats around you sometimes get, and the government is denying it, and the government is saying it's simply untrue, and in no respect are they accepting direction of American policy. And the government's saying this very openly. Either the government officials and senior government ministers are both in public and in private telling the most extraordinary lies, or the Trump administration is making claims to boost Trump's prowess and claim victory when he hasn't actually really won a victory. At the moment, my thinking is it does look more like the latter. But this is to give. Trump faced a Grand Old Duke of York scenario where he had moved an extraordinary proportion of the United States military to just off the coast of Venezuela. So he had to, in some way, claim victory or look like a fool. And I think they're making claims of control, which I do not believe to be true. But I am obviously going to investigate that further and deeper.
The Chinese state oil purchasing body today announced it was no longer buying Venezuelan oil. This would seem, might not be, but would seem to lend circumstantial support to the story that Trump is telling, that he is now in control of the Venezuelan oil industry.
I think we are going to see a shift towards Venezuela selling more oil into the United States, which the United States seems very keen on. If you like, the key question there is, are they paying the market price? Are they paying as much as the Chinese were paying, or are they in some way controlling and extorting the oil cheaply or for free? But this also connects to there's an oil reform law going through Parliament, which is at its second or third reading at the moment. But that started before the American attack. That was already something which was in process because the Venezuelan government has been very aware of the need to attract foreign capital to revitalize its oil industry. It's been doing quite well. Actually, Venezuelan oil production has increased every year for the last 4 years under state production. But because of the effect of sanctions, because of so much of their money being stolen, including the billions stolen by the British government in Venezuelan gold, their access to capital is limited. So they were already planning to open up to foreign capital to some extent, and that's a process which you can certainly characterize as being in part a result of American pressure through the sanctions, but it's not a process which has just started or been a direct result of the new military pressure.
Now, as we speak, President Maduro and presumably also his wife, Celia, languish in the very penitentiary that Jeffrey Epstein was suicided in. It is, by all accounts, as grim as anything in the American penal system. He was, of course, illegally seized, kidnapped in an act of piracy, and illegally rendered, black-bagged, and taken to the United States. This must be an enormous blow to the amor propre of the Venezuelan masses who loved him. The masses loved him. There were many people who didn't, but the ordinary masses in Venezuela definitely loved him. I saw it, experienced it with my own eyes. It's also a blow to the credibility of the Chavista movement that must be said to have had the responsibility for the security of their own leader.
I think that's true. There are feelings here, very mixed emotions here of anger, outrage, disappointment, and shame, and anger at the futility of an inability to do anything back. In the fact, an inability militarily to protect a small country like this from somewhere as powerful as the United States. I think it's worth saying that, with a very few exceptions, even the opposition here are entirely against the kidnap of Maduro. And in fact, the National Assembly unanimously passed a resolution condemning the kidnap. And there is a certain rallying around the flag as a result. I think insofar as the American action was designed to cause a civil war, if you like, or to try to bring about the collapse of the government, or weaken the government substantially politically, that hasn't worked. There's really, I'm not finding much evidence of that at all. And I've certainly found nobody in Venezuela who supports the kidnap of Maduro. And people across the political spectrum are outraged by this attack on their national sovereignty.
How long are you there, Craig, and how can people follow your work, and how can they help you financially maintain it?
That's a very kind question. I don't know how. I mean, when I went to Lebanon just over a year ago, I went for 3 weeks and I stayed for 5 months because I found that being effectively the only really working Western reporter in the troubled areas was a worthwhile thing, and I had good work to do. It's the same here. As long as I feel I'm productive and helpful and helping people understand the situation, I will stay, even if that's for months. If you go to my website, craigmurray.org.uk, you can find, because I'm funded entirely by my subscribers, same model as you have. If you can find ways to donate there, and links also to a GoFundMe, which I've started specifically to fund the work in Venezuela. And we're recruiting local cinematographers and journalists to work with us here to start producing some really interesting films on some very, very interesting topics, like the takeover of multinationals by workers' collectives, for example, which is vastly underreported and really worth looking at.